Day 7 of Singapore's election campaign, and Prime Minister and People's Action Party's Secretary-General Loong has called for a strong mandate as the country navigates through the COVID-19 crisis. He says he's determined to hand over Singapore intact and in good working order to the next team. Mr. Lee says that he'll be seeing this crisis through with the likes of senior ministers Hsien and Tharman Shanmugaratnam, as well as the fourth-generation ministers. Mr. Lee was speaking at an online rally that follows a PAP tradition of holding a lunchtime general election rally at Fullerton Square. But because of COVID-19, this time it was streamed live online. Brandon Tanota with more.
Fellow Singaporeans,
the stakes in this general election are higher than ever, something which Prime Minister Loong makes clear at the rally. Against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, a dual economic and health crisis with no certainty that things will turn out well, Mr. Lee says Singapore's response to the crisis will determine the country's future. Hence, he urges Singaporeans to give him and his People's Action Party team their full support in order to lead the country through it.
I have worked hard to field the strongest possible team for this election. It's an experienced team. It includes capable ministers whom I rely on to get things done and to take care of Singaporeans in this crisis. And seasoned, energetic MPs who will look after you in every constituency. Speak up for you in Parliament and make sure the PAP government is focused on your needs and aspirations. It's also a team refreshed and reinforced with a younger generation of promising leaders from all walks of life. They will bring new ideas and perspectives on tackling the challenges ahead. And I hope the younger first-time voters will identify with them and see them as candidates who represent their views and will advance their interests. My duty as PM is not just to take good care of Singapore during my time in office. It's also to prepare new generations of leaders who can take over from me and my older colleagues and lead Singapore into a different future. And that's why this time the PAP is fielding 27 new candidates, a record number. But to serve you, we first need to get elected. Your MPs and ministers have done their best. You've seen our track record. If you think we've delivered and made your life better, please vote for us. If you think we have not, then by all means, vote us out. But do not confuse signals by voting opposition if what you really want is a PAP MP to look after your constituency and town council and a PAP government to look after Singapore. The opposition says they are offering Singaporeans insurance, just in case you need it. But don't buy insurance from someone on a promise, especially when you have reason to suspect this company cannot pay out on the insurance and their checks will bounce. With the PAP, you know that when we promise anything, we will deliver. We have walked with Singaporeans for 6 decades. We first became the government in 1959. The PAP won that crucial first election because we represented the national consensus and our people's collective hopes for their future. After more than 60 years, this hasn't changed. The PAP still reaches out broadly to the population. Our policies have improved people's lives beyond measure. We've maintained trust with the people, and we've renewed our leadership to keep the party vigorous and in sync with your aspirations. As ESM Goh Chok Tong recently put it, we believe in political renewal, not political recycling. I cannot say that such a state of affairs will last forever. But do not undermine a system that has served you well. Look at the countries that change governments regularly. Their political consensus has frayed. After a government falls, what follows isn't a new, more stable equilibrium, but more frequent changes of governments and divisive politicking. People appear to have a choice, but often the more things change, the more they remain the same. These countries have not done better than Singapore. So I ask Singaporeans, don't be taken in by those who say that's important just to have more choices. Look carefully at the choices they offer you. Ask yourself if they can deliver. Don't be taken for a ride. Your future is at stake.
Mr. Lee stresses that this election is watched closely by the world, one which will show whether Singapore is united or divided. He adds that the opposition has nothing to say about getting Singapore out of the downturn, growing the economy, or creating new jobs. Mr. Lee says the opposition has prattled on about things like a minimum wage or universal basic income, which he says are just fashionable peacetime slogans and not serious wartime plans.
At this moment of danger and alarm, the opposition parties are talking as if we can just keep to our old ways and the crisis did not exist. They show no recognition that we are facing the crisis of a generation. They've been completely silent on how to tackle COVID-19, both during the last 6 months and in this election campaign.
Mr. Lee also recalls how crises like SARS and the global financial crisis pose grave challenges as well. But he says each time the government led from the front, Singaporeans rallied and the country pulled through. He also calls on voters to support the party that has walked this journey with them and served them for 6 decades. Mr. Lee, who's now 68 years old, had previously also said he hoped to step aside for the new leadership team before he turned 70.
What I did not expect, what no one expected, was to meet this overwhelming crisis in the last stretch of my premiership. But I count myself fortunate to have been elected by you and chosen by my fellow ministers and MPs to lead Singapore through this critical crisis. COVID-19 is the crisis of a generation. It's more complex and more dangerous than any previous crisis we have met. Again, there can be no certainty that things will turn out well. But we must have the same unshakable will to marshal all our energies and resources to fight it together, prevail, and emerge stronger. Our response in this crisis will determine the future of our country and prospects for our children and grandchildren in Singapore. You have my word. Together with my older colleagues like Hsien and Tharman Shanmugaratnam, as well as the younger 4G ministers, I will see this through. I'm determined to hand over Singapore intact and in good working order to the next team. I have spent all my adult life serving my country because I believe in Singapore. That's why I took a scholarship to serve in the SAF. That's why when ESM Goh Chok Tong asked me to enter politics, I agreed. All my life I felt a deep personal responsibility to do my part to keep Singapore safe and make it succeed. Now, to get through this crisis, I need your help. I cannot do it alone. I need the strongest team we can find to work with me and with you. I also need full support from all of you.
Mr. Lee calls on the Pioneer and Merdeka generations, parents and young people for their support. He adds that if everyone works together, Singapore will be vastly transformed and the future generations can be proud of what will be built.
But at this critical moment, Singapore needs a capable government with the full support of a united people more than ever. Have no fear. Instead, be confident. Singapore will endure this searching trial. We will be tested, but we will not be found wanting. My team and I will walk this journey with you. Please vote for us. Vote PAP for our lives, our jobs, our future.